What if the most profound act of power in a world that never stops shouting is not to speak, but to choose your silence? What if the greatest strength you could ever possess is not the ability to command others, but the disciplined refusal to be commanded by your own appetites, by the opinions of the crowd, or by the unpredictable whims of fortune? We are taught to measure our lives by what we accumulate, by the noise we make, by the attention we can harvest. But the ancient Stoics taught a different physics of the soul, that true freedom, true resilience, is forged not in acquisition, but in subtraction. By the end of our time together, you will understand the one principle that allows you to turn the crushing weight of social expectation into the raw material of your own unshakable character. You will learn not just to withstand the storm, but to become the calm eye at its center, and we will return to that one principle, the master key to the inner citadel, before our journey is done. The path we will walk is one of philosophy, a love of wisdom translated into a lived practice. It is not, and never can be, a substitute for professional medical advice, legal counsel, or the specific guidance of a therapist. It is an exploration of ideas, a set of tools for self-examination, and an invitation to build a more resilient mind. The choices you make with these tools remain yours, and yours alone. Reflect on them, test them with reason, and always apply them with prudence and care for yourself and for others in the human family. We live today in a state of constant, low-grade fever, a fever of connectivity, of visibility, of performance. Our lives are lived on a public stage where every choice, every relationship, every quiet moment is subject to immediate judgment. The digital forum has become our Colosseum, and the currency is not skill or virtue, but the fleeting validation of the anonymous crowd. We are told that to be silent is to be absent, to withdraw is to fail. To choose solitude is to confess a brokenness. For a man, this pressure manifests as a demand for constant forward momentum, for quantifiable success, for a projection of unwavering confidence. For a woman, the script is often more insidious, demanding not just success, but a specific kind of emotional and physical availability, a constant participation in the dance of being seen, desired, and approved of. To step away from this dance is to invite suspicion. She is labeled cold, difficult, incomplete. He is called a failure, a recluse, a ghost. But the Stoics would look at this cultural diagnosis and see a profound misunderstanding of human nature. They would argue that this frantic external performance is not a sign of life, but a symptom of inner slavery. It is the behavior of a soul that has outsourced its sense of worth to things it cannot control, the opinions of others, the stability of a relationship, the metrics of a career, the reflection in a mirror. When you anchor your peace of mind to these externals, you have chained yourself to 1,000 masters, each one capable of pulling you into anxiety, jealousy, and despair with the slightest tug. The world sees the person who steps back, who chooses a period of abstinence not merely from romance but from the whole chaotic marketplace of external validation, and it sees a void. The Stoic sees a crucible. The world sees an absence. The Stoic sees the deliberate clearing of a space, a sacred pause, where the real work can finally begin. This is not repression. Repression is the desperate, fearful act of shoving an emotion or a desire into the cellar of the mind, pretending it isn't there. It always comes back, often with reinforcements. What we are speaking of is redirection. It is the conscious, rational decision to withdraw your most precious resource, your attention, your energy, your power of ascent from the turbulent outer world, and to invest it, for a season, entirely in the inner one. It is here that the voice of reason, what the ancients called the times hegemonikon times, or the ruling faculty of the mind, can finally be heard. It was always there, but it was drowned out by the clamor of desire, the static of anxiety, the endless whisper of what will they think? When the body grows quiet, when the relentless pursuit of external goals is put on hold, this other faculty sharpens. The world might call the initial feeling loneliness, but the practitioner begins to recognize it as a profound and startling communion with the self. It is the end of performance and the beginning of perception. The silence is not an admission of having nothing to say. It is the condition required, for the very first time, to truly listen. But the voice of reason does not soothe, not at first. It confronts, it holds up a merciless mirror. As you pull back from the constant stimulation of praise and desire, you begin to feel everything you once used the noise to avoid. The scaffolding you leaned on for your identity, your job title, your role as a partner, your social status, your curated image begins to creak and splinter. And when it falls away, what remains? You. Just you. Stripped bare of your external armor. No longer someone's employee, someone's lover, someone's rival, someone's icon. The raw, unfiltered reality of your own consciousness. For many, this is excruciating. It is the terrifying freedom of the open ocean after a lifetime spent clinging to a raft made of other people's expectations. This is the Stoics' meeting with the shadow, but it is not a meeting with some mythic, unconscious beast. It is a confrontation with your own catalogue of false judgments. It is the dawning, gut-wrenching realization that you have been worshipping idols. You have been placing ultimate value on things that are, by their very nature, fleeting, fragile, and utterly beyond your control. The ache that settles in during this period of withdrawal is not the ache of absence. It is the pain of cognitive dissonance. It is the friction of your soul grinding against a lifetime of flawed programming. You question the choice. Doubt, like a creeping fog, seeps into the silence. Society whispers that you are wasting your life, that you are falling behind, that you are letting yourself go. Friends may drift away, uncomfortable with a stillness they mistake for sadness. But deep within the storm of this discomfort, if you hold fast, you know you are not withdrawing, you are descending. This is not isolation, it is an initiation. It is a journey to the bedrock of the self, to the one and only thing that is truly yours. Your faculty of choice, your ability to reason, your power to form judgments. And it is here, in the rubble of the old, fractured identity, that the architect of the true self can finally begin to lay a new foundation. Before we explore how that foundation is built, let's make this real. Consider the story of a man we will call Marcus, not the emperor, but an architect in our own time. His entire identity was his firm. The awards on the wall, the magazine features, the respect of his peers. These were not just career achievements, they were the pillars of his self-worth. His relationships were extensions of this identity. He chose partners who looked good on his arm at industry events, friends who could advance his social standing. His fortress was magnificent, but it was built entirely of things outside of himself. Then came the recession, a series of cancelled projects, a partnership dispute, and suddenly the firm collapsed. The awards were just gilded plastic. The phone stopped ringing. The partner who loved the successful architect had little time for the man facing failure. Marcus did not just lose a business, he lost his entire universe. His suffering was immense, not because losing a company is pleasant, but because his judgment was that in losing the company, he had lost times himself. He had no inner citadel to retreat to. His entire kingdom had been external, and it was now occupied by enemy forces. His downfall was not the recession. His downfall was a lifetime of philosophical error, of building on land he did not own. The Stoics gave us a master tool to prevent this kind of collapse. It is the foundational principle of their entire system, often called the dichotomy of control. It is the radical, life-altering practice of separating everything in human experience into two distinct categories, that which is up to us and that which is not. What is not up to us? Everything external. your health, your wealth, your reputation, the opinions of others, the outcome of your efforts, the past and the future. You can influence these things, sometimes profoundly, but you can never, ever have ultimate control over them. They are, to use the Stoic term, indifference. They are not intrinsically good or bad. They are simply the raw material you have to work with. What, then, is up to us? Only one thing, the inner world of your own mind. Specifically, your judgments, your intentions, your volitions, the assent you give to your impressions, and the actions you choose to take based on those reasoned judgments. That's it. That is the beginning and the end of your kingdom. Imagine an archer. She cannot control the wind, the humidity, the sudden movement of the target, or the structural integrity of the bow. If she stakes her inner peace on hitting the bullseye, she has doomed herself to a life of anxiety and frustration. The Stoic archer, however, understands the dichotomy of control. She puts every ounce of her focus, training, and attention into the things she times can, times control. Her stance, her breathing, the tension in the string, the smoothness of her release. She does her absolute best with what is hers to command. The moment the arrow leaves the bow, the outcome is no longer up to her. It belongs to the universe. Therefore, she attaches her sense of worth not to the outcome hitting the target, but to the excellence of her own input. She finds satisfaction in a well-executed shot, regardless of where it lands. This is the source of unshakable tranquility. It is the art of desiring that things happen as they do, by focusing your will entirely on what is within the domain of your will. Marcus the architect staked his peace on the arrow, hitting the bullseye. When the winds of fortune changed, his spirit shattered. A Stoic architect would have staked his worth on the integrity of his design, the diligence of his work, and the honesty of his dealings, and slept soundly whether the market boomed or busted. This principle sounds simple. It is anything but. It is a blade that you must use every single day to dissect your own experience, to carve away the fat of your anxieties about things you cannot control, leaving only the lean muscle of virtuous action. This is the first task in the quiet crucible of withdrawal. It is a full-time job of self-observation. When a pang of anxiety hits, you must pause and ask, what is this feeling attached to? Is it attached to something I control or something I do not? If you are anxious about an upcoming presentation, you must dissect that anxiety. The audience's reaction, not up to you. The boss's mood, not up to you. The project's ultimate success, not up to you. Your preparation, the clarity of your slides, the honesty of your speech, your calm and rational delivery, entirely up to you. Shift every quantum of your energy from the first category to the second. This is not a passive resignation. It is the strategic reallocation of your power to the only battlefield where you can guarantee victory. Let's turn to a different kind of story. Not a sudden downfall, but a slow, creeping erosion. This is the story of Elena, a graphic designer who spent her 20s and early 30s in a state of perpetual reaction. She was a chameleon, brilliantly adapting to the expectations of her clients, her partners, her friends. Her life was a mosaic of other people's desires. She built a successful freelance career by saying yes to everything. She navigated a series of long-term relationships by subtly molding her personality to match her partners. She was liked, she was desired. She was, by all external measures, thriving. But inside, a strange hollowness began to grow. It wasn't a loud crisis like Marcus's. It was a quiet, persistent ache, a sense of being a ghost in her own life. She was a collection of exquisitely crafted masks with no discernible face underneath. Her awakening was not a dramatic decision, but a slow, instinctual pulling back. She started turning down projects that didn't align with her own aesthetic, even when the money was good. She let a relationship end not because of a fight, but because she realized she didn't know who she was without the constant reflection of her partner's gaze. She started spending weekends alone, not out of sadness, but out of a desperate need for silence. This was her strategic withdrawal, and in that silence she encountered the mirror. For the first time, she had to confront the terrifying question, who am I when no one is watching? Who am I when I am not trying to be useful or desirable or agreeable? The initial confrontation was brutal. She realized her entire emotional landscape was a response to external triggers. She felt happy when she got praise, anxious when she sensed disapproval, content when a partner was pleased with her. She had no independent, internal source of validation. The Stoics would say she had not yet learned the second great principle, the distinction between events and our judgments about them. Epictetus stated it with surgical clarity. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. Elena's peace was disturbed not by her client's feedback, but by her times, judgment times. That positive feedback meant she was worthy, and negative feedback meant she was a fraud. Her emotional stability was not dependent on her partners, but on her times, judgment times, that their happiness was her responsibility and a measure of her value as a person. Her period of solitude became a laboratory for re-engineering these judgments. An email from a client with critical feedback would arrive. Before, it would have sent a jolt of panic through her system. Now, she would practice a discipline the Stoics called the art of assent. She would see the initial impression, this is bad, I have failed, and she would refuse to assent to it. She would pause, she would look at the event itself, words on a screen, that is the reality. The judgment, I have failed, is an added layer of interpretation, a story she is telling herself. She would deliberately replace it with a more rational judgment. Here is some information I can use to improve the design. This is an opportunity to practice my craft and my patience. This is incredibly difficult work. It is like strengthening a muscle that has atrophied for decades. Each time she caught a flawed judgment and replaced it with a reasoned one, she was doing a single repetition. Day by day, week by week, the muscle of her reason grew stronger. The silence that had once felt like an empty, echoing chamber began to feel like a workshop. It was the space where she was dismantling the rickety, reactive self and forging a new one, piece by deliberate piece. With time, the silence that once seemed barren reveals itself as profoundly generative. The absence becomes a womb. In this space, one is not passive, one is preparing. You are not waiting to be chosen, but becoming the one who chooses. Your withdrawal is no longer interpreted through the lens of lack, but of sacred intention. You are not withholding. You are protecting something delicate yet powerful that is forming within. The shift is subtle but unmistakable. You begin to sense yourself as sovereign. Your value is no longer a fluctuating stock price on the market of public opinion. It is a stable internal reserve of gold, its value determined by the one thing you control, your own character. This is the path to what the Stoics called times eudaimonia, times a state, often translated as happiness, but more accurately described as human flourishing, a life of excellence and virtue. It is the deep, abiding tranquility that comes from living in accordance with your own nature as a rational, social being. In this state, you are no longer pulled by the hunger for pleasure or the terror of pain. You are guided by discernment. The rituals of your life change. You move slower because you are no longer chasing anything. You listen deeper because you are no longer waiting for your turn to speak and perform. You speak less, but each word carries the weight of your full, considered presence. The silence becomes fluent, and your power becomes quiet but immovable. What once felt like self-denial now reveals itself as the ultimate act of self-creation. This brings us to our third story, the story of a credible transformation. Let's imagine a woman named Sarah, a teacher. For years, she lived in a state of quiet desperation, buffeted by the immense pressures of her job, the emotional demands of her family, and a gnawing sense of inadequacy. She was constantly exhausted, running on a deficit of energy and self-worth. She experienced a health scare, a minor one in the grand scheme of things, but it was enough to serve as a profound wake-up call. It was a stark reminder from nature that her body, her time, her life were not infinite resources. She saw the path she was on, a path of slow burnout, leading to a quiet, regretful end, and she chose to turn. She didn't quit her job or abandon her family. Her withdrawal was more subtle, more surgical. It was a withdrawal of assent. She began a practice, inspired by the Stoics, that she called her daily triage. Every morning, she would sit in silence for 10 minutes and mentally sort the challenges of the coming day into the two baskets. To me, and not up to me. The difficult mood of a particular student, not up to her. Her calm, patient, and just response to that student, entirely up to her. The unreasonable demands from the school administration, not up to her. Her clear, professional, and well-reasoned communication about her own boundaries, entirely up to her. The outcome of her child's soccer game, not up to her. The encouragement and support she offered her child regardless of the score, entirely up to her. This simple daily exercise began to rewire her brain. It was her training in the forge. She coupled this with a second practice, the conscious interrogation of her impressions. When the feeling of being overwhelmed began to rise, she would pause, she would stop, and name the judgment fueling the feeling. The judgment was often something like, "I am not doing enough, and therefore I am failing." She would challenge it with reason. Is it true that I must do everything perfectly to be a person of worth? Is my value as a teacher or a mother contingent on outcomes I do not control? She would replace the toxic judgment with a more grounded one. I will do what is mine to do with excellence and virtue today. The rest is not my business. Slowly, miraculously, things began to change. The external pressures did not vanish. The students were still challenging, the administration still demanding, but Sarah's internal state was transformed. She was no longer a ship tossed on the waves. She was the lighthouse, firmly planted on the bedrock of her own reason. Her colleagues noticed the change. They mistook her newfound calm for detachment. They said she didn't seem to care as much anymore. In reality, she cared more than ever, but she had learned to care about the right things. She poured her energy not into worrying about results, but into the quality of her own actions. Her teaching became more present, more focused. Her relationships became more honest, because she was no longer contorting herself to manage other people's emotions. She had built her inner citadel, not of stone and mortar, but of disciplined judgment and rational choice. She had not become superhuman or unfeeling. She had become something far more rare, a truly free human being. One day, something clicks. The discomfort doesn't vanish, but it transforms into awareness. The loneliness doesn't grip, it hums with a quiet energy. Your inner world, once a chaotic landscape of longing and fear, now holds a vast, clear space. You do not feel empty, you feel precise. Your energy is no longer scattered in 1,000 directions, seeking validation like a beggar seeking scraps. It is consolidated, magnetic, whole. The person who once feared being alone now guards their solitude with a quiet reverence. You know your own company is not a consolation prize. It is a sacred ground. This is the moment the world begins to profoundly misread you, not because you are distant, but because you are no longer available for dilution. You are no longer a resource to be plundered, an emotional well for others to draw from without limit. You have established a perimeter. The ancient Stoics saw this as the ultimate expression of our rational nature, our time's prohairesis asterisk, our faculty of choice. This is the divine spark within us, the part of us that is untouched by fortune, unassailable by tyrants, and utterly free, even in chains. When you identify with this faculty, you realize that nothing external can truly harm you. It can harm your body, your reputation, your property, but it cannot touch your character unless you allow it to. It cannot force you to assent to a false judgment. It cannot compel you to act against your own reason. This is the impregnable fortress. When you operate from this fortress, your relationship with the world changes. You do not seek love to complete you. You seek to express the virtue of justice and kindness in your connections, reflecting a wholeness you already embody. Marcus Aurelius wrote that what we deny enslaves us, but what we integrate transforms us. This is the alchemy of Stoicism. It takes the leaden weight of fear, anxiety, and desire, and through the fire of reason and the acid of self-examination, it transforms them into the gold of inner freedom. You no longer need to be rescued by a partner, by a promotion, by a change in circumstance. You have become the one who rescues yourself. And so, when love returns to your life, if it does, it will not find a person in waiting, a half-soul searching for its missing piece. It will find a sovereign state, a whole person looking to form an alliance with another whole person. You do not bend to find connection. You become a source of gravity, a quiet fire around which the right souls, those who value reason and virtue, will naturally gather. The entire journey was never about absence. It was about remembering that nothing outside of you can nourish what you have not first awakened within. The silence of the body, the withdrawal from the world's frantic dance, is not emptiness. It is the sacred pause before transformation. What looks like giving up is, in fact, the most profound act of taking hold. When a person turns inward, not out of fear or failure, but from a rational, courageous urge to reclaim the very center of their being, they do not disappear, they emerge. The voice that rises from within them is not loud, but it is unshakable, and once it is heard, it cannot be unheard. It is the voice of your own reason, your own ruling faculty, speaking in the simple, unwavering language of truth. This path is not about rejection, it is about remembering a power that does not need to be seen, because it is the source of its own seeing, remembering a worth that does not need to be validated, because it is self-evident. You no longer seek external things to feel whole. You bring your wholeness to every circumstance. You no longer fear being alone. You walk with yourself as your most honest and trusted companion. Now, let us close the loop we opened at the beginning. That one Stoic principle, the master key that allows you to turn pressure into strength. You have seen it woven through every story, every analysis. It is the clear, unwavering, and ruthlessly practiced distinction between what you control and what you do not. This is not a clever mental trick. It is the operating system for a resilient life. It is the foundation of the inner citadel. When pressure comes from the outside, from your boss, from society, from your own biology, you apply this filter. Is this thing that is pressuring me within my control? If the answer is no, then it is an indifferent. You can deal with it calmly and rationally without staking your peace of mind on changing it. You can act with virtue in response to it, but you will not be disturbed by it. If the answer is yes, if the pressure is coming from your own unexamined judgments and desires, then you have found the work. That is where your power lies. You have the complete and total ability to challenge that judgment, to question that desire, and to choose a different path. The pressure does not vanish. But it is no longer a crushing weight. It becomes information. It becomes a signal, pointing you back to the only place where you have true agency. The ache you may feel is the beginning. It is the signal that the old structure is no longer sound. Trust it, follow it inward, interrogate it with reason. Because when the frantic pursuit of the external grows silent, your own ruling faculty begins to speak, and it speaks only of what is true, what is virtuous, and what is ultimately, unbreakably yours. This fortification of the self is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of a new chapter. Once the inner citadel is secure, the Stoic does not remain within its walls forever. The goal is to become a sage in the world, not a hermit in a cave. The next step is to test this newfound resilience, to bring this inner calm into the chaos of the public square. Perhaps then, we will next explore the discipline of action and the art of desire, how a Stoic navigates a world of temptation and obligation, not by changing the world, but by mastering their response to it, and in so doing, becoming a quiet force for reason and justice for all.